Welcome to Diary of a Queen. I'm your host, Danielle Martin. I'm joined today by Emily Ciepcielinski from North Carolina. And what y'all don't know is about 10 seconds ago, I asked her how to pronounce her last name because I didn't want to murder it. Thank you so much for being on. I'm so happy you're here.
Thanks, Danielle. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I haven't gotten to talk with you in a while. We spent a couple minutes before we started recording, just kind of catching up. Our children had been in school together a couple years ago, which seems like eons ago, yet 4 seconds ago,
Right.
all at the same time.
That's exactly right. Yes. I know kindergarten and first grade together, right? Which again, yes. A lifetime ago.
And I have been following everything that you do, and I'm so completely impressed with all of the things that you do. You've helped so many people, and I want to dig into some of those things because, as we were just talking about a couple of minutes ago, I am honored, blessed, beyond grateful that people share their lives with me and with an audience. And you're in the same boat. So tell us about what you do for a living and the types of things that you focus on, because the work that you do is so greatly important.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm a licensed therapist. I see clients virtually and in my office here in Charlotte. And I specialize in mostly eating disorders. I'd say that's the bulk of my clientele. And then I always tell people that people don't come in just to my office with just an eating disorder. There's always anxiety or depression or some type of grief and loss issue or trauma. So I see everything, but I would say I specialize in anxiety and eating disorders and have for about 20 years. So my whole career, it's been a specialty of mine and really, really passionate, both from just clinically what I've seen over the years and then on a personal level as well.
So the not funny thing, but the thing about eating disorders that I think that people don't realize is they think it's a specific age.
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit so that people are more informed about the types of people, and they always specifically think that it's women.
Yep.
I would love for you to talk about that.
People think it's a certain age. People think it's women. It's a certain gender, and people think it's a certain size. And I'm here to debunk all of that. We see eating disorders starting, I hate to say this, as young as 8, all the way up to, I'm sure there's people in their 70s, 80s. I personally have the oldest clients I think I've seen are probably in their 60s. But there's emerging research around eating disorders in midlife and how served and undertreated it is. But yeah, it's not, people used to think it was a thin white woman's issue, and it's just not. You have people of all body sizes that struggle with disordered eating, men, women, all genders, and really across the lifespan for sure. What happens, as you can imagine, you as a mom, I'm sure you get it, Danielle, people will come in for their children and fight for them and want to get treatment. Busy, parents sometimes, or people later in life, either don't know that there's options for treatment, or it's not talked about it's not talked about in their friend groups. So it's just really, it's going undertreated, unfortunately.
When people come to you, are they typically in progressive, they're already sunk in pretty deeply, or is it beginning? When do people normally get to the level where they're getting therapy?
That's a great question. I've seen it all. I've seen people that come in and they think that they're getting treatment, or I shouldn't say think, they intend to get treatment for their anxiety. And that starts with just, I'm also having some body image issues. And then we kind of dig in a little bit more, and we're finding that they're really restrictive in their food patterns, and that they're kind of have, I hate to say it, but like a baby eating disorder. It's kind of developing. And so we're able to really, stop it in its tracks with parental support, or, if they're older, familial support, spousal support, all that. I would say, certainly I see people, coming in and they're in the throes of it, and they've hit their rock bottom, and that's why they're reaching out. So really all of it, I would say, the people that are more therapeutically savvy and it's not taboo in their family to reach out, we can catch them pretty early. But yeah, some families, it's like until it's a crisis and really, really acute, they're not coming in for treatment.
And so you've been doing this now for 20 years, and therapy is so wide ranging. And I want to talk about the time during COVID, because I'm sure there was an uptick, and
Yes.
what that looked like, and people that probably needed to be coming in for therapy that weren't, because they may have been afraid to do so or whatever. But um, why are you focusing? Why eating disorders? Why was that something that you wanted to focus on?
Yeah, yeah. So growing up, I definitely saw eating disorders just rampant. And I grew up in Charlotte, actually, moved all around, but grew up in Charlotte. Eating disorders were rampant in my high school, and it was not talked about it. People had to go away for treatment up north. There was no treatment facilities back then. So saw some dear friends really suffer and struggle, and it just went under the radar. I mean, not to say their parents weren't concerned and all that, but just treatment wasn't accessible. They weren't. It wasn't an easy road for them. I myself struggled with really disordered eating in high school as well, and it really began. This is why I'm so anti-diet. It began with just dieting, very innocent. Just was an athlete. Kind of started kind of changing my approach to food, and that just kind of started a really disordered relationship with food that I really had to work for years to restore and to balance. And I happily can say I do have a healthy relationship with food now. So it was personal, dear, dear friends. And then I'll never forget, I was in my first internship in California after my master's degree, and just met a client. She was in South LA, a really underserved population, and had an eating disorder. And just, I don't know, I just got her, Danielle. We kind of spoke the same language. And I remember her saying to me, like, I can tell you get it. And we just connected. And again, similar to my friends growing up in high school, she just didn't have the resources. Her parents did not understand eating disorders or really any mental health struggles. It was kind of taboo to go to therapy within her culture. She just she got to me. I mean, many clients have gotten to me over the years, but she was one of the first. I said, I think I want to pursue this specialty in eating disorders. And then
Well,
on a
I'm
kind of broader level, um, I think I'm such a believer, and I think food, the way we feed ourselves, is such a metaphor for how we kind of nourish ourselves in general in our
Mhm.
life. So I think for me, treating eating disorder just became a way really for me to help people find better ways to nourish themselves. I mean, we talk about food in my sessions, but it's not about the food. We're going so much deeper than that. And so I see it, again, it was such a women's issue, I think, years and years ago. And now we're seeing that it's not a women's issue. It's an all human issue of, okay, how do we cope differently, manage our emotions differently, deal with our trauma differently, and ultimately find ways to nourish ourselves and find meaningful lives.
Well, I'm so glad you're doing the work that you're doing, and I've been seeing you more and more. Um, it's funny because somebody might think it's marketing, when
Right.
you're talking
Right.
about your business,
Yeah.
and when you're in the type of business that you're in, you are to a degree marketing, but you're marketing because you want to help people,
Right. Right.
and let people know that it's okay to reach out for help. So I have had, but probably more people that don't even know that they've had this touch their lives. I've had somebody touch my life, a dear friend from high school when I was younger.
Yep.
And what's crazy about her situation is, so she's now what would essentially be an adult female, almost 18 years old,
Sure.
down to 78 pounds, and her family completely disbelieving that
Mm.
there was an issue.
Yep.
And the two takeaways, now that I have spoken with her, because she has a daughter now as well, the two takeaways that I have always gotten from her is, first, you never really kind of outgrow it. People just think you get cured from it. And she says something that I have to work at all the time. And secondly, that it can be something that you pass on in
Mm.
family.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that was a real concern with her having a daughter. So as far as the therapy goes and what that lifelong looks like. Can you talk a little bit about that and how relatable that is in families? Do you see it if it's more than one person in a family? I'd like to talk about that as well.
Yeah, so research really shows they've tried to identify the genetic components for whether it's anorexia or bulimia, and yes, they have found links that it can be genetic, I should say. I think they, again, I'd have to get back into the research to refamiliarize myself with it, but I think they've done twin studies and all those things. So yes, they've identified there is a genetic component. What I always tell people with eating disorders, it is such a congruence of so many different factors, though. Like when people, especially when parents want to blame themselves or look for reasons why an eating disorder emerged. I mean, it's cultural, it's familial, maybe to some extent, it's genetic, it's the child's temperament, their own maybe mental health struggles. So anyway, so many different factors, for sure, a genetic component. I believe in full recovery. I truly do. This is the best analogy that I've ever, that I typically share with clients. And a client years and years and years ago shared it with me. And he said, when you're in the throes of an eating disorder, the thoughts and the obsessions around food and weight and body image feel like a fire breathing dragon, right? It's constant, it's omnipresent, it's just everywhere, it's screaming at you. And I've had many clients say that the eating disorder voice just feels so loud in their head. And he said once he got recovered and had a stable weight and a better relationship with food, he said sometimes during stressful times in life, it's like a little gnat that just kind of floats across his periphery or on the horizon, and he's able to swat them away. Does that, anyway, I love that. I love that imagery because I think it's true. Will these thoughts never resurface? I can't guarantee that, especially when typically we see anxiety kind of undergirding the eating disorder. So you might always struggle with some flavor of anxiety, anxious thoughts and all that, but you're just so much more able to regulate them, deal with them, give them less power.
And I think that's where she's at and what she's speaking to, that it's it's a part of the fabric of who she is. And so when those thoughts, what she calls irrational thoughts, come up, that she is able to thwart them and put them aside. But because it's a part of the fabric of who she is, where other people may not be thinking about those things and letting food control them, and as opposed to them being able to control that process, it's just something that's always there for her. The thing about her that I always found so interesting was how her family dealt with the situation. And so another thing I'd love for you to touch on is, what are some of the signs? So a parent for a child, what are some of the signs that they could recognize? Because young women are the same as regular women, right? We love to hide stuff, right? We love to wear masks, and we're really, really good at it.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the signs that maybe a parent could notice in a child? And then just for a regular adult, what kind of signs should they be looking for to recognize, this might be an issue?
Absolutely. So, okay. So, and it's going to be similar with kids and adults, but you're seeing, I mean, you again, an eating disorder so rarely exists by itself. There's going to be other accompanying, comorbidities that accompany it. So you're going to look for mood changes, whether that's anxiety or depression. You're going to look for rigid thought patterns around food, and they might articulate it or they might not. That might be internal and they're just thinking about calories consumed or certain types of foods consumed. But if you do, if you're able to observe it, that can look like logging, keeping a food journal or logging it on an app. Some of these apps unfortunately kind of encourage that hypervigilance around food. You might see, when they do eat, they're again, either not finishing it all, or just again, a rigid approach around their plate or how they're eating or types of foods. On the other end, for people struggling with binge eating, sometimes that is very, like you said, so much hiding can occur with that because of the shame associated. So I've certainly heard parents say that they're finding wrappers in backpacks or under beds or things like that. So you're going to notice things around the food behaviors for sure. Rigidity. Maybe your child is looking just out of control, like a loss of control around food. Maybe they're looking like they're using food to cope, that there's a pattern with, I've had a hard day, something really challenging happened at school, and now I'm either restricting or overeating or binging, or anyway, using food in some way. Mood changes for sure. On the physical side, you could see some weight fluctuation on either side of the spectrum, right? Just some changes there. For women, for menstruating women, there can be a change in their cycle, loss of hair, loss of energy. Anyway, so I think that's a lot, right? But so many things to kind of look for. But I think some of the biggest things is just the how they're using food, what their relationship with food is like, and how, and I always ask clients at intake, how much of your thought life is consumed by this. And I mean, it can be 80 to 90% of their waking time. So it's causing significant distress in their daily life.
And I'm sure, because we are so great at wearing masks and hiding things, that there are so many people who have, like what you described, a baby eating disorder, like things are starting, things are brewing. And, during this whole COVID process over the last couple years, the pressures that, that put on people, losing jobs, people losing money, just all the different pressures. Did you see an uptick during COVID?
Unprecedented. I mean, I think therapists across the board run just the wildest wait lists and everything. So yeah, I would say across the board, anxiety, depression. But yeah, and I'm forgetting the stats, but when I first saw it, I was like, oh my goodness. But yeah, eating disorders through the roof. But think about it, Danielle, doesn't it make sense? We were home on lockdown for weeks and months, and food is something, we don't always consciously do this by any means, but it is something to control. It is something to manipulate. It is something that can be used to cope. So it can be a go-to for people for sure. And it was during COVID.
I have a great friend who's an addiction specialist, and he said during the time, of course, no pun intended, but business is very good right now.
Yes.
It was very busy for him because people were using whatever they needed in order to cope. Even those without issues were having
That's
problems.
exactly
That
exactly.
I joked about with my husband. I was like, I have never had so many opportunities where I'm like, I think I'll have a glass of wine, you
Yep.
know, you know, and I'm certainly not somebody that drinks very often, but I started noticing, man, I'm having like 2 and 3 glasses of wine a week, where I would normally have 2 or 3 a month.
Sure.
And that's when I called my friend. I'm like, are you doing okay? Are your clients doing okay? I'm sure this must be very difficult if they're stuck at home dealing with anxiety and dealing with all of those things. The one thing that I will say during that time, thank heavens for modern day technology,
Oh,
because
goodness.
he was
Yes.
able to consult with people virtually, as I'm sure you
Yes.
were as well.
Well, 100% blessing and curse. There's a spectrum, right? I don't want to make it black
Right.
and white, but technology, what we did see too, yes, made it therapy accessible, amazing. People were able to connect with loved ones. And then I think many teens in particular retreated to their phones and social media. And that, I think,
Right.
I mean, don't even get me on my soapbox on some of the harm. Again, I believe social media can be so healing and helpful in so many ways. And then there's the incredibly damaging effects that we saw
Right.
as well during the pandemic.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer that you find good in the things that you want to find good in, and you find bad in the things that you want to
Yeah.
find bad in. But that everything, no matter what it is, seems to be better in moderation.
Let's be yeah. I always tell people, let's, especially around social media. I mean, that's a huge part of my work, is let's be a critical consumer. Let's look at this image. Let's really think about it. Let's, not follow people that don't make you feel good. If you feel terrible after you've been, looking at someone's content. So yeah, you're right. We have to be incredibly mindful about it.
And you just brought something up that made me think, because social media, wow, how that must affect your clients and how difficult that must be if you're already having a problem dealing with life in general. Now let's put it on a small screen that's in your face all the time,
Mhm.
where it's so easy to compare ourselves,
Yes,
especially if perfectionism is your intended goal
that's right.
and it's causing you to have a real conflict with food. I can just imagine that that is just gasoline to the fire.
That's exactly what it is. It is gasoline. You have so much misinformation. You have, whether it's celebrities or just influencers, putting out information about, food trends or,
Right. Diet.
exercising. It can, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a huge part of my work with a certain age group. I mean, yeah, we spend a lot of time talking about social media and comparisons and yeah, just the incredibly low self-esteem that occurs you when your life is kind of saturated in that. When you frankly, I I use the word addicted very cautiously typically, but I do think it can be an incredible form of an addiction, just with the dopamine hits that social media provides and smartphones and all that. So we have to
Absolutely.
kind of unlearn that. I think this generation that had such early access to smartphones and technology, we didn't. It was kind of the wild west, until they've done some of these reports on some of the harmful effects, and now yeah, I think we're realizing what it did to these young kids, and we're having to kind of undo some of that.
Agreed.
Hmm.
So at the end of every show, I really like for the guest to give one piece of advice. And that advice can be to women, it could be to people in general, it could be related to what you do for a living, it could be because you're a mom, it could be for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you had to give one piece of advice to anybody that's listening, what would be your piece of
Ooh,
advice?
I love that question. Gosh, I could say so many things, but what's really coming up for me right now is for people to do their own work. So we're not um, passing on some of our pain to the next generation, passing on dysfunctional patterns. And I tell this to parents a lot. I say, I think our job as parents, I mean, there's so many books we could read and skills and strategies to utilize, and all that's great and important and all. But I think if we can stay centered, be healthy humans, regulate our emotions, do our own therapeutic work, I mean, what an example we'd be giving to them. So yeah, do your own work. Don't be afraid of therapy. We all could use it.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, work on yourself, and then I think that extends out into your friend groups, your social groups, your family.
It can absolutely break generational curses. And I think that that is such a wonderful piece of advice. Both Emily and I are telling you, if you are feeling like you need help, please
Please.
reach out, reach out and get help. There are so many different avenues of places you can go, people you can see, and people that you can talk to. And I hope that some of the things that we talked about today would encourage anybody that is feeling like they do need help and they do need to reach out to somebody, that they will do so. Emily, thank you. Thank you so much for all that you do in the community and beyond. It is greatly appreciated. People need your help, and I'm so happy that you're the person to be able to do that.
Oh, thank you, Danielle. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And for anybody that's watching, please like the video because it gives us an idea of what content we need to continue to put out. We've had guests from all over the country, all over the world at this point, and we love doing it for you. We love being able to connect. Believe me, I've talked to many guests on the show. Not only does what we do help you, you help us in return. And we're so very grateful for all of that. And subscribe to the channel. You'll get notifications every time a new video comes out. With that being said, Emily, thank you so much. And this has been Diary of a Queen.
Thanks, Danielle.